Well, the Batman's on HBO, so one more reason to not delete your ex-girlfriend's mom's HBO Go password. Harvey Dent, can we trust him? It's almost 3 hours long, so if you have yourself an open afternoon, you can watch it now. At the risk of outing myself as being a film nerd, one of my all-time favorite movies is Smoking No Smoking, and that's a 5-hour movie. Most movies don't need to be 3 hours, though. All right, let's get the color grade going right now. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, now it's too dark, so let's bring it up a little bit. Okay, that's a little bit better. So I guess we're just going to treat Batman like 007, where we just get one every 2 years no matter what, and we just keep rotating through actors. Sure. Do I have a favorite Batman? No. Maybe Batman Beyond? I don't know. Yeah, so the Batman. Robert Pattinson of Twilight and then a bunch of art film fame, and Zoe Kravitz of Lenny Kravitz's daughter fame. A bunch of other great actors in this movie too. I mean, it's got all the Batman stuff. It's got Commissioner Gordon, it's got crime, it's got the Penguin, it's got the Riddler. It's got all the Batman stuff. At what point does a movie that's so much in the fashion of actually just end up becoming a parody of itself? I don't know. I don't understand the point of having an origin story of a character that we see every 2 years no matter what. I mean, credit where credit's due, Casino Royale is probably the best 007 movie, and that was an origin story. But most of the time, the 007 movies are not origin stories. So Batman is sad, Batman is an orphan, Batman is rich, Batman is afraid of bats, and Batman is sad. I mean, you do the same thing for Catwoman. Catwoman is cat-like, has a lot of cats, wears a lot of leather, is acrobatic, and is a cat person. Don't get me wrong, it's a good movie, I gotta say. It's well written, the visuals are absolutely stunning, the acting is quite good. The why of it all is what I'm having a problem with. I mean, cards on the table, I was not even a little bit on board when Ben Affleck was Batman, but also Christian Bale was Batman sort of when I became of age where films were important to me. And before that, George Clooney was Batman when I was growing up. As much as I wasn't a fan of the movie Joker, at least it sort of told a point of view that we hadn't really explored before, or at least in such a deep way. And this kind of seems to be going off of that a little bit. I'll tell you right now, there's a knife hidden somewhere in plain view on his batsuit, and when he pulled it out both times, I guffawed. I feel like more than most movies ever, the Batman movies require a level of suspended disbelief. The bottom half of Robert Pattinson's face visible. Looks like Robert Pattinson to me. Zoe Kravitz kind of wears a mask sometimes, but then also doesn't, but also she's not a superhero, but also she is. Is that a problem for anybody? The Penguin is literally a guy who looks like a penguin, which actually is kind of true to the source material, so I'm not mad at that. Paul Dano plays the Riddler, which I would argue is just a heightened version of a Paul Dano character. I'll be honest, once I got everything sort of dialed in correctly, I had to use my computer monitor, which is a 10-bit monitor in a dark room, because I was watching it on a TV in a not completely black room, and I couldn't see anything, because this entire movie takes place at night, in the dark. And somebody thought it was a great idea to have this entire movie exist in the bottom 25% of the color spectrum of the image. I'm sure in a properly calibrated theater, with a projector bulb that has a healthy amount of time left on it, so it's bright enough, this movie looks absolutely stunning. But that's sort of the catch-22. Like, this movie was very much bespoke, designed to be seen and experienced in the theater, which obviously COVID sort of undermines a little bit. But almost everything gets played now in not a movie theater. And so, again, we're in a situation where it doesn't look very good on a 1080p monitor in a room that's not completely black, which is most people's experience, I think. But even when I plugged it into my rig, the sound got all messed up. All of a sudden, the music played the correct levels, but the dialogue, I had to completely max out my speakers. And so when I switched to Spotify, I pretty much knocked the windows out of my room. This is one of those movies that rewards you for going to the theater and experiencing it the way it was intended to be experienced. And yes, HBO is an afterthought, and that's mostly a response to the coronavirus and the fact that the industry is evolving faster than the films that are being made. And yeah, as a colorist, credit where credit's due. The color grade was absolutely spectacular. I have feelings about only having like 3 colors in every scene because I feel like it's not my style, but it looked absolutely stunning. The movie was long. I can't get past the fact that the movie was long. It took me like 3 sittings and a lunch break to get through this movie just because I set it up, I can't see anything, I'm messing with stuff, I set it up again in a different room, I'm having to still tune stuff, I'm having to mess with the audio, and then I eat lunch because I'm a human who has, food desires, and then I'm back in it and I still have 2 hours left of this movie. It's like, how much of this story is going to actually be told today? Not as much as you'd think is the answer to that. You ever seen those movies that young directors in film school make where there's like a panning shot on like a building for like 2 minutes and you're like, okay, great, we have a building, but are we really supposed to just soak in the artistic merit of the shot for 2 minutes? There was a lot of that in this movie. Difference is it's properly financed, properly designed, properly composed. So it's absolutely the best version of the slow pan around the building. That's for sure. But again, you're still dealing with the fact that you're seeing a building and that's the only piece of information you see for 2 minutes. It's really easy in these Batman movies to really break down all the creative choices the filmmakers make on sort of what Batman's capabilities are and what his suit's capabilities are, and in this case, what his car's capabilities are. At the end of the day, he's a crazy guy with a lot of money who uses martial arts to defeat bad guys, and I appreciate the fact that this was one of those where he doesn't like guns. But still, in context, this is a hard-boiled sort of detective story where there's a guy walking around in the leather bat mask, and everybody seems to be begrudgingly okay with that, and that did take me out of it a little bit. Am I mad I didn't see it in theaters? Only in that the virus is what stopped me from doing it. I probably would have seen it in the first couple weeks just because I do think there's sort of a religious experience that happens in the movie theater with these kind of movies. But that was not what I had access to, and so I saw it the way the regulars see it. And at some point, I'm going to have to put a rant video out about how, especially movies, the color grade and the sound quality gets completely destroyed by the time it goes out onto a streaming device. And why is that okay? So yes, Batman is sort of uncovering the mystery of both his parents' mysterious death, who I think there's a different explanation every single time we get a different Batman, but he's also sort of unraveling the mystery that is set out for him by the Riddler, which is just Paul Dano in a gas mask who wears his glasses on the outside of his gas mask for reasons that are very unclear to me. And then Zoe Kravitz is like a bartender, but she's also kind of a stripper, but she's also kind of like a master thief, but also not. We got grappling hooks, we got motorcycles, we got a car that I don't think physically makes sense, but we have the Fast and Furious franchises, so that's actually not a huge deal breaker these days. I'm just racking my brain to try to figure out what new ground is being trod by this version of Batman, other than we finally got Robert Pattinson to be a superhero, which everybody thought was never going to happen. I mean, Zoe Kravitz is awesome. I liked her in X-Men First Class. I watched her in that COVID movie where she hears stuff online. She was the guy from Parks and Rec's daughter in that movie about music, which makes sense because she's a musician and her dad is obviously Lenny Kravitz. A lot of famous people in this movie doing renditions of characters we know from Batman. And, you know, sure, Alfred is the guy from Planet of the Apes, which makes sense because that's where the director came from. Just why? Just why? I'm not saying it's a bad story. It's a satisfying story, especially if you've never, ever seen Batman, although I don't know how that's possible these days. And Gotham looks great. Looks a lot like New York City, but that is what it is. Catwoman's outfit is absolutely spectacular, and then they put like a pullover ski cap on her head, which didn't make a lot of sense when you look at the rest of her outfit, but sure. And Robert Pattinson is wearing between 25 and 150 pounds of body armor and is trying to look big around people who are actually physically big. And nobody wears eyeshadow like Robert Pattinson. I'm stuck on the runtime thing, I gotta say. I'm really only irritated because it took so long and I feel like I could have done something with my day, but now I'm in need of a shower and a shave and, you know, like a reimagining of what my day was supposed to be. I mean, it made crazy money at the box office, so it's definitely gonna get a sequel, but it was always gonna get a sequel or reimagining or remake or another prequel, because that's what the Batman franchises are. There's sort of a late reveal about the actual bad guys connected to the Riddler, which I don't think is going to age very well. I don't know why I'm trying to break this movie down. It's a popcorn movie. You're either going to see it or not, and based on everything, it seems like everybody's going to see it. It could have been a shorter, tighter movie, without question. It also could have been bright enough that I could have actually seen what's going on, and I would have appreciated it more. Inevitably, you're going to end up comparing this movie to all the other Batmans, and does it stand up to the Christopher Nolan ones? I don't think so. Does it stand up to the Ben Affleck ones? Sure, didn't watch it, couldn't tell you. Does it stand up to the Joel Schumacher era? I think that's where it fits the most appropriately, if I'm being honest. Does it stand up to the 1960s TV show? It's way more faithful to that than it is the rest of it, I feel like. I just hope this doesn't mean Robert Pattinson only does blockbusters from here on out, because I really have a lot of respect for him as an art house person. The Lighthouse, for instance. And this can probably only help Zoe Kravitz's career and legitimize her as like a real actor, even though she's been acting for like 20 years at this point. I mean, if you haven't seen it by now, should you go see it? Sure. You're not going to get the movie theater experience probably, and it is what it is. It's also a very, very long movie that's going to require a lot of breaks if you're sort of the kind of person that I've become. Upshot is it's not hard to follow, and they pretty much hold your hand the whole way, and everybody looks awesome in it. There's a lot of weird murders that don't make a lot of sense, and there's a lot of like the camera's facing the wrong way when important stuff is happening, but that's sort of the nature of the Batman. Everything takes place in the shadows. There's like an opening bit where criminals are afraid looking into the shadows when they're doing bad things because Batman might be there. The voiceover, I forgot about the voiceover. This movie has a ton of voiceover. Not a fan. It doesn't help that I can hear Robert Pattinson just throttling that American accent that he's been working on since Twilight. Oh, the voiceover. Will I go see the inevitable sequel? Maybe. I assume the coronavirus will have ended at that point and I'll actually be able to go out in public, but never say never on that one. There was also the name of another town that Zoe Kravitz, it's like Bloodville or something, or Bloodvale, and I was like, is that, I don't know the names of all the DC cities, but that seems like a really sinister place that is just a comic book joke. I'm realizing there's less and less of a point to actually critique some sort of blockbuster movie because that's not the point. People either go see it or they don't. There's no like artistic merit. I think we all got confused when Avengers came out and it was actually like a decent story that you can have a blockbuster that has like a compelling story. And it's nice, and I encourage all blockbusters to have this, but it's not really necessary because either people are going to go or they're not going to go. And in the case of the Avengers, in the case of Batman, people went. I don't know. I just can't get over the fact that they spent almost an hour trying to explain the context of this world and why this world is different from the Ben Affleck world and especially the Christopher Nolan world, where it doesn't really matter. And it's almost kind of better if you don't bother explaining that, because then you can sort of get into plot and story, which is what everybody wants, instead of figuring out where his Batcave is this time, figuring out if Zoe Kravitz can actually climb walls or if she's just using like a rope and a belay bell, like that kind of stuff. There was also a moment where water came out of my nose when I realized Zoe Kravitz was putting on these motorcycle riding gloves and her giant cat fingered like fingernails were coming out the tops because she had cut the fingertips off because she needed to be able to do that, I guess. I don't know. Great job cashing checks, moving on with lives. It came out. I guess that's a good thing. I know we know the lesson is there's no such thing as too big to fail, but this is one of those movies that as long as it was better than terrible, it would have probably done fine. And checkmate. I mean, it's got an 85% certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, 87% audience score, which is actually incredibly high. It's the Batman. Are Batman and Catwoman going to get together? I don't think so. There was a little bit of like a sexual circling happening, but it's not required that all movies have a romantic entanglement. That's not necessary. I think that's actually why James Bond gets himself in so much trouble storyline-wise, because the callousness of how he treats women has really not aged well. Yeah, good job. I mean, one more thing, and Robert Pattinson got to use the lower half of his face on screen again, and so that was, that was lovely. I'm sure the Twilight fans are super excited about that. It's entirely possible I blocked out 90% of this movie just because I was so annoyed by the fact that it was hard to see. I don't know. Feel for the focus puller. They shot this as wide open as possible, and the depth of field, the focus spot was just teeny tiny, and I didn't see any focus mistakes, but man, I was like stress sweating by how tight the focus was, especially in the dark. Although I'm pretty sure they didn't shoot this that dark. They made it dark artificially, but movie magic. Yeah, that's it. Sometimes you go out with a whimper. There was a moment where Zoe Kravitz was in that leather cat suit where she was doing like a front flip or something, and I was like, in the wedding version of this, the boobs pop out, and so she probably had to like duct tape those things in because I just feel like the flex of a leather jumpsuit is just, if it stops here, and you do this, your body is more flexible than the suit. That's kind of what I'm concerned about. Yeah.